Hello, my name is Abel, and today I'll be showing you how to create a simple menu for your 2D mobile platformer. Okay, and first let me demonstrate. Let's hit the play button. And you've got a screen like this where we have two buttons, the play button and the settings button with their nice little animations. And when we hit the play button, the scene changes to the gameplay scene. And if you're following me from the previous tutorials, all of this will be familiar to you. Okay, you have the same player cat, you have the mobile controls with the crates and the mountains. The addition is this home button, and when you press the home button, the scene changes back to the menu screen. I'll be showing you how to design this menu screen and then write a small script which will respond to these button clicks and which will help you in changing the scenes from the menu to the gameplay like this, and then back to the menu screen. Okay, so let's get started. First, let's exit the play mode. Now let's have a look inside the projects panel, and please look inside the sprites folder. There should be a UI folder. Double click the UI folder and right click and select create folder, and let's call this guy buttons, and create another folder and call it text. And we're going to store the game title here in the text folder and all the buttons in here in the buttons folder. So let's open our browsers and let's navigate to a website called gameart2d.com. Okay, now I want you to click the freebies section, and that's where the entire magic is. Here you see these are completely free game assets, and I really want to give credit to this person, the owner of this website, gameart2d.com, because he's been kind enough to provide a lot of high quality 2D sprites. As you can see, these are characters, and then down below you have free tile sets, the environments. This is awesome. And then for our buttons, you can use one of these packs here. So first, I want to show you the license here. Okay, it's important anytime you're using an image from the internet. It's always good to be aware of the licensing policies. Okay, now gameart2d.com mentions that for the game assets in the freebies section, they are under Creative Commons 0 or CC0. Now CC0 stands for public domain, which means you can use the assets free of cost and in your commercial or in your personal projects without the need to go ahead and give a credit. However, I always like to give credit because it's somebody's hard work, right? So, well, that's completely your call. But these freebies here, okay, here, completely free game assets, these are in the public domain. So thanks once again to gameart2d, and you can use the cat game character from here. Okay, you can just click on this and you're gonna see a free download button. You can click on this. I've already done that, and it's going to be a zip file which has two folders, one for cat and one for this dog. Okay, and now if you want to look at the background, you can grab the assets from here, the free platformer tile set. It's got this jungle background, or feel free to use any of the backgrounds that you want. And as for the buttons, we're going to grab this casual game button pack. Okay, here when you click the free download, again it's going to be a zip file, and so I've already downloaded the zip file here. Okay, and inside the zip file we have a button.png, and this is the file that we're going to drag and drop here. Okay, so let me show you. Just drag this button.png inside your buttons folder, and Unity is going to do the importing for you. Okay, and there. Now just to let you know, this file currently you cannot see the individual buttons inside, because if you see, this file looks like this. Okay, this is the file, and in technical terms or video game programming terms, this kind of an image is called a sprite sheet. Okay, now sprite sheet is simply an image which contains multiple images inside it, and these multiple images are arranged in rows and columns. They're said to be packaged or packed together using some sort of a compression algorithm. Definitely these are technical terms, and for beginners to programming or game programming or any technical subject, these things sound confusing. So just for a start, remember, if anybody talks to you about a sprite sheet, visualize in your mind that a sprite sheet looks like something like this, and it's always got more than one or two images, okay? Usually a lot of images, combined together, arranged in rows and columns like this, okay? Now I'll show you how you can actually extract these individual images from the single image or sprite sheet, okay? And Unity's got a wonderful tool to do that. So once you've highlighted this button image, please look inside the inspector panel, and here for the sprite mode, let's change this to multiple, okay? This is how you indicate that your image is a sprite sheet. And I want you to uncheck generate maps. This is for 3D games and not very useful in 2D. And please change the format to true color, okay? We don't want any compression right now. And looks good. We can click apply. And after these changes have been applied, now please click on this Sprite Editor and we'll see the magic of Sprite Editor. Now, this is a window which has this title Sprite Editor, and here's the single image. And let me zoom this image for you. And as you can see, this single image contains so many different sub images or smaller images. Now, we're going to use the Sprite Editor to extract, or in technical terms, splice these images into individual images for us to be able to use in our game, okay? And how we're going to do that is very simple. You see this slice option here, okay? It's actually a drop down. When you click on this, a sub window or a smaller window with these options will pop up, okay? Leave these options as they are and click the slice button, and let's see the magic. Okay, now if you notice, your small buttons now have, each of these buttons have a rectangular frame here, okay? Rectangular border. Now, what Unity's done is Unity has identified each and every image in this one single image, and now it's actually showing us a sort of a preview, and it wants us to check if everything's all right. And once we're okay that all of the images have been spliced or selected for us, we can hit the apply button, and then Unity is going to go ahead and create sub images out of this entire single image, and we'll see that in just a moment. And here's a question: how do you get to know that these changes have been applied? Well, look at these two options. They've been grayed out, right? And that's the indication that now the changes have been applied, and now this one image is actually divided into multiple images, okay? Like we indicated, sprite mode multiple. Let's close the Sprite Editor and say thank you to Unity for helping us out. And here, when you click this drop down, see, you have so many buttons now, all right? And you can actually drag and drop these buttons like so here, okay, in the scene panel. And when you drag and drop images like this, game objects of those images are created here, like so, in the hierarchy panel, okay? So now, since these buttons are available to us, let's go ahead and download the game title. Let's head back to our browser and let's type in cool text. Okay, and as the name says, cool text, this is really a cool site which allows us to create these kind of text-based titles. And for this demonstration, let me select the second template here, and it's very easy to use. You have this text area where you can type anything. I'm typing in super platformer just for an example. You can use any name here, and here, while we're talking, your game title is ready. Yeah, it's that simple. And you can right click on this image and select save as, and you can download it anywhere. And let me name this as game title, and let's save the image, and we're going to drag and drop this image inside the text folder here, okay? Let me just grab this image here, and let me go to Unity and right here, and so we just dragged and dropped the image. It's the same as importing an asset, okay? When you right click and you select import new asset, and if you were to go to desktop and select this and import it, that's the same as dragging and dropping an image here, okay? So it's just the same thing. So we now have game title and we have the buttons, okay? Our player is right here. If you look here in the players in the cat folder, you can take one of these images from here, okay? And the only thing that remains is the background, and the background is right here, okay? So let's begin by dragging the background right here, okay? And let me show you a small trick here. First, let's go ahead and save the whole thing. Now let's go to scenes, let's go to gameplay, and we already have a background here, right? and we want the same values, position, rotation, and scale of this BG image. So how do we actually copy all of these? Is that possible? Yes, that's very easy. All you need to do is click the gear icon, select copy component, and let's head back to the menu scene here and highlight the BG game object, and in the inspector panel here, select the gear icon and paste component values, and that's it. You did not have to worry about trying to figure out the height and the width of your background image, right? I think this will be a useful technique for you in your future games and projects. So now once we have the background, we need to have the two buttons also, right? So let's right click inside the hierarchy panel, and under UI, let's select button. And Unity is going to create a canvas, a button, under the button a text component, and an event system. Well, I have discussed about these various components in my previous tutorials. So for this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can overcome a common problem when you're developing for multiple screens and devices. And the problem is your GUI elements or your game design might not look the same when you change between devices, okay? So how do you overcome that? First, let's have a look. You have a canvas, you have a button, but in this scene view, do you see the button anywhere? The button is invisible. Okay, but why is that so? All right, first, when you initiate or when you initialize a canvas, or when you right click and select UI, and for the first time you add any of these button elements or any of these GUI elements, Unity adds a canvas to the scene view, and the canvas is really huge. And let me show you. Let's zoom out, and if you start to notice, there's a white border, okay, this rectangle. So let me introduce you to the canvas. This is what a canvas looks like, and you can visualize a canvas in your mind like a thin plastic sheet on which you're going to arrange your GUI elements like the button. Okay, if I want this button to be placed right here like so, you know, this is how the canvas looks like, and this is how you can arrange your GUI elements on it. However, by default, the canvas is really huge, okay? And if you notice this tiny little green thingy here, this is the background, but we don't want this kind of a configuration, right? So here's the trick. While the canvas is highlighted, let's have a look here in the inspector panel and under the canvas properties or the canvas component. You'll see that you have a render mode property, okay, which is a drop down with these three options. So I want you to select screen space camera, and these two more properties will appear. For render camera, let's go ahead and select the main camera. And by the way, this is the same camera which is here in your hierarchy panel, okay? Now, if you notice, the moment you selected the main camera, everything just vanished, right? But it's actually there in the system. Now it's the same size as that of your current camera, okay? Your canvas has been resized to the size of your main camera, okay? So this is the first step. The second step, look inside the canvas scaler script. You'll see that you have a UI scale mode property, which is also a drop down. And currently, if you have constant pixel size, I want you to change this to scale with screen size. And after doing that, look at reference resolution, and it's going to have a X and Y component. And what are these X and Y? Okay, when you look at the camera here, the white rectangular frame or the border, the vertical is Y and the horizontal is X, okay? Let me write 1024 here and 600 here. If you look inside your game panel or the game view here, you're going to notice, or you might have already noticed, or you might be working with this, there's a drop down here and which has these couple of values, okay? You might not have this particular value because I created it using this plus button here. You can click the plus here, add in a label, maybe give it test, keep a fixed resolution, and maybe add in 1024 for the X and 600 here, and click OK. So you're going to have your custom value, okay? And since I'm using a Galaxy Tab 3 in the landscape mode, so 1024 by 600 is the resolution of Galaxy Tab 3. And that's a light version, the 7-inch version. So that's the reason I have 1024 here for X. Always remember, X is the horizontal and Y is the vertical. Okay, this green is Y, this red is X. Okay, the arrow in this direction is X, the arrow in the upward direction is Y. The total vertical length is 600 units and the total horizontal length is 1024. Now, this resolution here corresponds to the camera. The camera actually follows this particular resolution. You can test it quickly by changing it to maybe a portrait. And you notice the camera changes, right? Now it's more of a vertical rectangle than a horizontal. And if you change this to maybe landscape, this thing here, it again expands. So you see the camera actually corresponds to values here. And so it's good practice to develop it to a specific resolution. And then the canvas scaler script is going to help you scale to different resolutions. Once you've specified your X and Y, you need to look here, screen match mode. And if you have match width or height selected, keep it that way or change this to match width or height. And here, change this to 0.5. Okay. Now you might be wondering, where did I get this trick from, right? It's very easy actually. It's there on the Unity documentation. And if you remember from my previous tutorials, anytime you have some doubt or question about this particular component you're working with, you can click this blue book icon here and it'll open the Unity manual, which is stored locally as you can see here. And it's going to display all of the information about the selected component. In this case, it's Canvas Scaler. Now, when you look at Canvas Scaler, first of all, you'll see all the properties. Okay, these are all properties, the drop down and all. You'll see information about them. And when you scroll down, you'll start to see some details. Okay, and in the details, when you come here, you see hints, right? So there is a particular page about designing UI for multiple resolutions. Okay, so sounds good. We're going to click on this link and it brings us to this page here, designing UI for multiple resolutions. You may want to have a look at it because this will definitely be of help to you. The thing that I want to show you is right at the bottom here. Okay, the reason I selected 0.5 is so when you're working with scaling with screen size, and let me show you, if you scroll down to this particular part in this tutorial, the component has a property called match. It can be 0, 1, or a value in between. By default, it's set to 0, and this, right? Now, if the match property is set to 0.5 instead, it's going to compare both the current width and the height and scale accordingly. You can read this in detail if you want to. This is very helpful information. But this is the clue, okay? This is the information that I use here. The reason I put 0.5 here is this is a normalized value, which is going to tell the Canvas Scaler script that, hey, what I want to do is I want you to increase the width by 50% and increase the height by 50%. All right, so that's going to do the magic for you. So once that's done, you might want to say, hey, but I see a button here in the hierarchy, but where is it? I don't see any button here. Okay, and again, that's because if you highlight the canvas, okay, the canvas has a property here. It's called sorting layer, and the layer number, the order in layer, it's currently set to 0. Okay, that's a clue here, because if you look at your BG game object, the background, you see the sorting layer is here and the order in layer is 0. Now, if you remember from my previous tutorials, I told you that sorting layers are like a queue, okay? Like in real life, people stand in a queue and somebody can be behind you, somebody can be ahead of you, somebody's right at the front, somebody's right at the back, at the bottom. So this canvas and this BG are both standing right next to one another. And BG somehow says that because BG was created first, BG has precedence, okay? It's going to be above the canvas. So the simple way of bringing the canvas in front of the BG is to change this order and layer and assign it any value higher than 0. So in this case, let me use 1, and that does the trick. The button is visible now. Okay, now highlighting the button, look inside the inspector panel and you have the image script component, which has the source image property. We're going to change this. So for this, let's look inside the project folder. In the UI section, we have a buttons folder, and now so many buttons are available for you. So we're going to use button 5 and button 6, and I'll show you where you use button 6. Let's go back to the button, highlight it, look here, in the source image, we're going to drag button 5 like so and drop it here in the source image. And what this does is it's going to assign the new sprite, but it's still a little elongated, right? It doesn't look good. So this button here, this guy, set native size. When you press this, that's it. The button resizes to a more acceptable, visually beautiful form. Okay, now since you have a button, the size of the button still looks a little big, right? And if you go to your game panel, you can see the visual representation or how the game would look like, okay, on an actual device. And our reference resolution is Galaxy Tab 3 landscape 1024 by 600. And let me just drag this guy here in the center. And the other way of centering it, you can position this to 0. And now let's change the width and the height, okay? Let's change this to 300 and 110, okay? Now this is a predetermined value. I got this by trial and error while working on my other projects. This looks pretty okay, but you may want to experiment according to your preferences. For this demonstration, let's use this value. And now this button has a text component. So let's name it play. And you see it's got these properties, the font style. I'm going to show you how you can actually apply a custom font and later on in the tutorial. But for now, let's change this to 40. Okay, so you can actually see that it's got a label play, and we're going to leave these as default. And you might want to further change this to maybe 40, maybe 50. And this looks okay. And we're going to name this button as button play. Okay, I have this naming convention where anytime I create the UI elements, I go ahead and rename canvas to UI. Okay, and as you'll see, you can have different types of UIs, one for mobile, one for your desktop, and so on and so forth. So this is a good way of organizing your UI elements. Now the buttons, I always like to have a prefix BTN, which is an abbreviation or a shortened form for button. And this way, any person who looks at your code or your design knows automatically that, hey, you're referring to a button here. And this text, I like to prefix it as text underscore text play. Okay, so now you know intuitively that, okay, this is a button and this is maybe a text element which has the label play. So now let's duplicate this button by hitting Command D on Mac and Control D on Windows, and you're going to have a copy of the previous button. Let's call this new copy as characters, okay? And you may wonder why characters. Now, I plan to show you something very interesting in my next two tutorials. So for now, let's change this to characters and also change this to characters, right? And also let's bring this button right down here. So you have play and your characters. Now let's hit the play button and you see these two buttons, play and characters. And when you see, now when I click the button, you see that there's some sort of an animation. When I click, the button grays out, or the color and technically the tint of the button changes. Okay, so I'll show you. This is no mystery, and let me reveal the mystery to you. It's very simple actually. Every button has a button script. The button script has a transition property, okay? Now, if you look, this transition property has these options: none, color tint, sprite swap, and animation, okay? Okay, I know you're excited, so let's get started. Transition with color tint allows you to specify a normal color, okay, a highlighted color, and a pressed color. So if you remember when we were in the play mode, when I clicked the button changed its color, right? So that color can be specified from here. Let's change it to red and see what happens. Okay, here, color, there we go. You see? So just by doing a simple change in the transition drop down, there, you can actually now have this sort of an animation. Okay, you change the press color. You can change it to whatever you want, maybe orange. And you're going to have an orange effect. Okay, so this can be very handy when you want to design some sort of an interactivity. You don't want any static images for your buttons. You want the buttons to be responsive. The other thing is Sprite Swap, and which I'll be using in this tutorial. And this particular feature allows you to specify a pressed sprite, a highlight sprite, and obviously the target graphic is the same as this button here, and also a disable sprite. So first let's look at the pressed sprite here. For this, I'm going to drag button 6 here like so, and button 6 actually looks like this, the orange. So let's get back to characters, and now you have specified a press sprite. Let's press play and see what happens. And there we go. We have this nice little animation now. When you press the button, you have this orange animation effect. Actually, you have this sprite swap. You have this sprite swapping going on, and this gives you this nice little animation. Okay, you can apply the same to the play button. So let's quickly do that. Click button play, go to transition, change to sprite swap, and drag and drop button 6 to the pressed sprite, and that's about it. That's about it. It's really very simple. And there we go. We have these nice little animations. Okay. Alrighty. Now the next thing that I want you to see is how can you change the fonts on your buttons, and that's also very easy. Select a particular button and then highlight its text component, and here in the inspector panel you'll see the font field. Okay, currently it's a system defined font called Arial. We're going to change it to something that we have in our project, and I have already downloaded a font here called Comica. For that, let's go to Google, and in here let's type font Squirrel, and this is another awesome site which allows you to use a lot of fonts for almost 100% free for commercial use. So let's type in Comica, M-I-K-A, and this is the one that I'm using, Comica Access, and it'll bring you to this particular page here. Now you can simply go ahead and download the TDF version, but I'd like you to see a few more things, and something very important. Anytime you want to download a font from Font Squirrel, please pay attention to this particular part. Okay, you have these particular icons, and if you hover your mouse, the icon changes to, or the mouse pointer changes to a question mark, and when you click on it, it tells you that okay, commercial desktop usage is allowed. So in short, when all of these icons are visible to you, means you can use these icons on that particular platform. For example, this icon represents applications. That means you can use the font in apps and software and video games. And if you look at this one, this says that you can use this icon for ebooks and PDF. This is a free license, and this one is for, you can embed it in your websites with your CSS, and this one here when you want to print commercial graphics and documents. Okay, make sure that anytime if you see that a particular icon is not visible or is grayed out, that means you cannot use on that platform. So be very careful about this, the licensing policies. Okay, and also you can test drive a particular font. For example, you might want to write play, and there you go. You'll have a feel of how it's going to look inside your game, and you can also change the sizes from here, and it's going to show you. Okay, so you can also have a look for characters, and this is how it's going to look like. All right, so feel free to download and experiment with fonts. Just make sure that you're aware of the licensing terms. That's about it. And if at any point of time you have any questions about a particular license, you can always contact. Okay, and this will be a great way to make sure that whatever you're using, you're aware of all the licensing concerns. Okay, that's about it. So once you have your font, you can create a folder called fonts and drag and drop the font here. And after you've done that, highlight the text element, drag and drop this font like so, and there we go. We have a nice looking Comica font here. We can do the same for the button characters as well. We drag and drop this font, drop it in here. And for this, you might want to change this to 35. Okay. All right, this looks about okay. So you have a play button, you have the characters button, okay? And now the only two things remaining are how you can use a game title and a player character. And both of these are very easy. For the game character, click your UI, select UI, and select an image. Okay, it's going to immediately instantiate or create an image for you. And for the image, my naming convention is img. And since this will be a player, so let's call it img_player. And with this button, I can move this player image a little up. And if you look, you have the source image. Let's go ahead and grab one of the player images. And for that, let's go to the sprites folder. Let's look inside players and the cat. And let me see, I think run 7 is pretty good to go. So let's drag and drop run 7, drag and drop it here and set its native size. Okay, and with this, we're going to reduce the size of the width to 200 and height to 200. And let's have a look in the game panel. Alrighty, it looks pretty okay. And let's bring this player a little up. Okay, the last thing that's remaining is your game title. So just the same way, go to UI and select an image, and let's call it img game title. Oops, title. And in the same way, let's drag this title right here at the top. And in the UI, you have a text where you've downloaded the game title. Now all that remains is you're going to drag it like so, and there we go. Okay, and you want to set its native size, and it's going to look something like this. And now let's change the width to 700 and 120 for the height. And let's have a look at what we have just created. And that's about it. This is the full screen view of your menu screen. Okay, it's very simple. There are only two buttons. When you click the buttons and they have the animations, you have an image of the player and you have a game title and a background. Okay, now let's go ahead and write a small script which will respond to these button clicks and change the screen to a gameplay screen. Exit this play mode. Let's go to the project panel and inside the scripts folder here. Now this script will be attached to buttons, right? So the way to do that is let's create an empty game object and let's call it menu CTRL, which is an abbreviation of menu controller. Okay, since this is a menu screen, let's assign a manager, or let's hire a controller or a manager for this screen, right? Like in real world, you have a certain task. So what you want to do is you want to hire a specialist and designate or delegate all of your tasks to this particular specialist. So in this case, this menu controller will be in charge of changing or responding to these button clicks and then changing the scene as per the instructions. And you'll see how easy it is. Let's go ahead and attach a new script called menu CTRL and like so. Okay, we're going to select C#, create and add. This is another way of creating your scripts. And by default, when you use this way, the scripts are created inside the assets folder like this. And then you can drag and drop it in any particular folder under the scripts folder for better organization. Okay, so we're going to do that later. First, let's double click the menu controller or menu CTRL script, and it's going to open it in MonoDevelop. And let's quickly do some coding. And for this particular part, we're not going to use the start and the update methods. And I like to keep the brackets like so for better code organization, but that's just a guideline. Please feel free to use your own coding convention. Okay, so let's create a public method called load scene, which takes in a string parameter called scene name. Okay, like so. And it's very simple. Now this is Unity 5.3.2 F1. Okay, let me show you the version of Unity I'm using is 5.3.2 F1 Personal Edition. And with 5.3, Unity introduced a different scene management systems. First, we're going to import a namespace called Unity Engine.Scene Management. The first step, and then in here, we're going to write scene manager dot load scene, and then load in this parameter scene name. So like so, and that's the only piece of code that you need to write in this script, right? That was easy, right? So scene manager dot load scene. Okay, if you need to figure out what scene manager does, you can copy this from here and then paste it in your Unity scripting manual, which is a local file, and you can invoke it using the blue book icon. So when you paste in scene manager in here, there right at the top you have the scene manager information, okay, and it tells you that this is a class which belongs to the Unity Engine.Scene Management namespace. Okay, and namespaces are like folders. Okay, they're used for organization of code, so there are no conflicts of names. Okay, like you have folder A, folder B, and both these folders can have a class called human beings. All right, if there were no namespaces, it wouldn't have been possible to create two classes with the same names. But since you have namespaces, okay, you can store the same named class but in two different namespaces, so there's no conflict. And you can always tell Unity that I want to use a particular namespace to call a particular class. Okay, but that is for another tutorial. Here, these are the variables, the static functions, and a lot more information, and the method we used was load scene. So if you click load scene here, you see this information, okay, and then you see that the load scene loads the scene by its name or index in build settings. So at this point of time, let's also do an important step. Okay, when you check your scenes folder, you have two of these, the gameplay and menu. These are scenes. However, anytime you create a new scene, you also need to go to build settings by clicking file and build settings, and you want to add the name of the scene here. There are two ways of doing that. One is drag and drop it like so, and it gets added. Or if the scene is open here in the Unity editor, you might just want to click on add open scenes, and that's it. And when you add a scene in the build settings, the scene is allocated an index number. Like the first one, gameplay, has index 0, which means it's going to be the first scene to be loaded. And then you have menu, which is the second one that's going to be loaded. But however, in traditional games, you see the menu first, right? So we're going to drag and drop the menu above the gameplay, and that rearranges the indexes. Okay, and having done this, we're good to go. And now let's add in the methods to the button play. So when you highlight the button play and look inside the inspector panel here in the on click block, the list should be empty, and you can populate it using this plus button, and you get a field like this. So we're going to drag and drop this menu control game object here. Okay, the reason why we did it is we want to invoke, or we want to call some method, okay, when this button is clicked. All right, now there is a script called menu control, okay, which has a function called load scene. How do you invoke that function? And the simple process is you take a game object, okay, which has the script, you click the plus button, and you drag and drop that object here, okay, and when you click this drop down, you're going to have access to the menu control script. All right, and you have the load scene method here, and since the load scene takes in a string parameter here, string scene name, that's the reason why you see a text box here where you can enter some information. And in this case, we're going to enter the name of the scene, that is gameplay. So let's call gameplay from here, and you're done. Which means when you press this button, the method inside the menu control script is going to check if there's a string parameter or a scene name mentioned here. And if it finds a scene name, it's going to check if the scene name exists. And if everything's fine, it's going to go ahead and load the gameplay scene. So let's go ahead and test it. Okay, so here's the menu screen, and when we click the play button, and that's it. It just took about one line of code in your script to change between the scenes, okay? And now you have this round little green button, and I press this button, but nothing happens. Can you figure out why this is not doing anything? Okay, that's absolutely perfect. There's no script attached to this button, or there's no method responding to this button click. So we can quickly do that. Let's go to the gameplay scene here. We have a game manager, like we had a menu manager. We have a game manager. You can also call it game CTRL. That's the abbreviated form for game controller. Okay, because the scene name is gameplay, so I just named it game controller. Okay, you can call it anything that you want. It really doesn't matter. All you need to do is add the component called menu control, and because the menu control script has a method, okay, which is public, means any scene can call it. Okay, and this is common. I created this method in a manner that it can be reused across different scenes. So we're going to see how. Okay, since you have the menu control script attached to the game control now, let's have a look in the UI and the button home. Okay, the same way, this on click block is empty, so we're going to populate it by clicking this plus button, and then we're going to drag game control here. Okay, and when you click this drop down, the menu control is right here, and you have the load scene. Okay, all right, now here's a question. What would I fill here in this particular text field? That's right. Okay, because we want to go back to the menu, we're going to put in the name menu. Oops, my caps lock was on. We are going to add in menu right here, and that's about it. So we can quickly go ahead and test it. When we click this button, that's it. That's it. The scene is changing, and when you click play, the scene changes to the gameplay. We have your familiar cat, and it's able to jump and do all kind of things. And when you press this home button, the scene changes to this menu. Okay, so I really want to thank you for watching this long and lengthy tutorial, and it was my intention to provide you with as much information as is relevant, and so that it helps you in understanding the entire process. Okay, there are still a lot of things which need to be covered, and well, I guess a series of tutorials or maybe an entire course about Unity 5 2D programming. So I'm not really sure, but feel free to share your tutorial suggestions. So we have this characters button now, okay, and nothing's happening. So the next part of this tutorial series will cover how you can go ahead and create a simple character select screen, because right now if you click play, you just have one character, right? Like so. And at this point of time, I want to thank one of our wonderful subscribers who had sent in this tutorial request. So thank you so much for sending in this request. And I think a tutorial where you create a character select screen will be something that can be added to this platformer series. Okay, so that's the reason I have this characters button here. You click on this, you'll see a character select screen. So thank you so much for joining me. My name is Abel, and I hope you've been able to get something of value from here. Please feel free to like, subscribe, or comment, and I'll try my best to help you as best as I can. Okay, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Till then, happy video game programming.